A Navy SEAL on medical hold retreats into the frozen mountains, believing the mission is finally over. One night, two injured strangers appear at his door, carrying fear, silence, and a truth meant to stay buried. Beside him, a German Shepherd K9 senses what no system can detect. Danger that hasn't revealed itself yet. No orders, no backup. Only a choice between obedience and protecting lives. What begins as shelter becomes a race against hidden networks, controlled silence, and human greed. Because sometimes God's warning doesn't come as thunder, but as instinct, loyalty, and a dog who refuses to move. Where are you watching from today? Like the video and subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends for more true-feeling stories. The mountain station was never meant to feel like home. It sat high above the tree line, half buried in snow, a utilitarian structure of concrete, steel, and narrow windows reinforced against wind and cold. It belonged to the Navy, technically, but it was used rarely, mostly for altitude acclimatization and cold weather drills. Now, in the dead of winter, it belonged to Ethan Cross alone. Ethan was 30 years old, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered without excess bulk. His build spoke of discipline rather than vanity. Muscle earned through repetition, not display. A faint scar traced the upper edge of his left shoulder, pale against weathered skin, the kind of mark that told a story only if someone knew where to look. His face was clean-shaven, angular, with a strong jaw that rarely clenched unless something inside him was already breaking. Tonight, he stood near the narrow window, watching snow erase the world. Medical hold. The phrase still tasted wrong in his mouth. He wasn't injured in any way that showed. No limp, no bandages. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled, his body still ready. But readiness wasn't the only metric anymore. After his last operation, classified, contained, and quietly buried, someone higher up had decided Ethan needed evaluation. Psychological, administrative, temporary, they said. Temporary felt endless when you were trained to move. Nix lay near the door, a German Shepherd with a black and tan coat that seemed almost too dark for the light inside. 7 years old. Lean, compact, all muscle and restraint. His ears were relaxed, his breathing slow, but his eyes never fully closed. Even at rest, Nix was working. Ethan trusted that more than anything. The wind howled outside, rattling the metal shutters. Snow struck the windows sideways, piling faster than the plow schedule could manage. Visibility was down to nothing. If anyone were foolish enough to be out there, they wouldn't last long. Nix rose, not abruptly, not in alarm, just rose. He moved to the door and stopped. He didn't bark, didn't growl. His body aligned squarely between Ethan and the entrance, legs locked, head forward, muscles drawn tight as wire. It was a posture Ethan had learned to read in places far from Montana, places where silence mattered more than sound. Something was wrong. "What is it?" Ethan asked quietly. Nix didn't look back. The dog's ears tilted forward, then slightly left. His breathing changed. Not faster, just shallower, focused. The kind of focus that came when the threat wasn't visible yet, but real. Ethan felt it then. Not fear, something colder. Recognition. A knock broke the silence. Hard, sharp, urgent. 3 strikes close together, rattling the reinforced door. Nix didn't move. Ethan's mind ran through the math automatically. Distance to the door, angle of approach. No radio signal. He'd checked an hour ago, just out of habit. Storm interference, he'd assumed. He moved closer, boots silent on concrete. Another knock. "Please," A woman's voice called through the wind. "Anyone inside, please?" Ethan leaned to the side window, cleared condensation with his sleeve. Two figures stood outside, half obscured by snow. One was supporting the other. The woman was in her early 30s, average height, slim but strong-looking despite the cold. Dark blonde hair was pulled into a low, practical knot at the base of her neck, strands plastered to her pale skin by snow and sweat. Her posture was controlled, too controlled for panic. She was cold, shaken, but not hysterical. Her eyes were sharp, scanning even as she leaned into the man beside her. The man was older, early 40s maybe. Broad frame gone slack with pain, blood darkened the side of his head, seeping beneath a knit cap that had been pulled down too far. His beard was untrimmed, more fatigue than fashion, and his breathing was uneven. A law enforcement badge flashed briefly at his belt when the wind shifted his coat. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," the woman called, raising a badge toward the window. Her hand trembled. Not from fear, Ethan noticed, but from cold and exhaustion. "My name is Claire Morgan. This is Deputy Luke Harmon. We were in an accident on the pass. He's injured. We need shelter and a way to call this in." FBI. Ethan didn't open the door. He watched for another long second. Claire Morgan met his gaze through the glass without flinching. Her face was drawn but composed, the kind of expression built from years of controlling reactions rather than indulging them. There was intelligence there, calculation, and beneath it, urgency she was holding back with effort. Luke Harmon sagged further, his weight dragging on her shoulder. Nix shifted, just slightly. His head turned, not toward the people outside, but toward the darkness beyond them. The tree line. The slope falling away into white nothing. Ethan's stomach tightened. He opened the door. Wind and snow rushed in, stealing heat and sound. Claire guided Luke inside, her movements careful, efficient. Up close, Luke looked worse. Blood had soaked into his collar, his skin pale beneath the beard. His eyes struggled to focus. "Thank you," Claire said, voice tight but sincere. "Thank you so much." Ethan closed the door and locked it, one bolt after another. Nix remained standing between them. Ethan turned the main light down, leaving only the glow from the overhead strips and the heater unit. "Sit him there," he said, pointing to a bench near the warmth. "Slow." Claire nodded and eased Luke down. Luke winced, but didn't complain. Tough. Or practiced. "I'm Ethan," Ethan said. He didn't offer more. Claire didn't ask. "We hit black ice," she said instead, automatically. "Truck slid. Rolled. We barely got out before." She stopped herself. Her eyes flicked just once to the window, before something else happened. Nix's ears rotated again. That was when it happened. Nix took one step forward, then froze completely. Not toward the door, toward the wall, toward the side of the station that faced the ridge. His hackles didn't rise. His tail didn't move. He just stopped. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms lift. Nix had done this once before, years ago. Different continent, different night. Ethan had ignored it then. He had followed orders instead. Someone hadn't made it out. "Nix," Ethan said softly. The dog didn't respond. Claire noticed now. "Your dog?" "Quiet," Ethan said. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. Outside, the storm raged on, but beneath it, barely audible, something else threaded through the noise, a sound too regular to be wind. Ethan turned his head slowly toward the wall, toward the ridge. And in that moment, with no orders, no mission, No authority beyond what he chose to carry. He understood. This night wasn't about shelter. It was about a line, and once crossed, there would be no stepping back. Ethan moved with practiced economy, his hands steady as he cleaned the blood from Luke Harmon's temple. The cut itself wasn't deep, but it had bled freely. Head wounds always did. Luke's skin was cold beneath Ethan's fingers, the chill of exposure layered over shock. Ethan wrapped a compress in gauze and pressed it gently into place. "Pressure," he said. "Slow breaths." Luke nodded, jaw tight. He was a big man, thick shoulders, the kind built from years of patrol work rather than the gym. But pain had a way of shrinking everyone to the same size. His beard was peppered with gray he probably pretended not to notice, and his eyes, brown and tired, kept flicking to the door as if he expected it to open again on its own. Claire stood a few steps back, shedding her outer coat. Underneath, she wore a dark thermal layer and utility pants that were practical without advertising authority. Her badge rested on the table now, deliberately placed where Ethan could see it, without her having to push it forward again. Her posture was upright, balanced on the balls of her feet. Ready, but not aggressive. The kind of stance you learned when you'd spent years convincing people you weren't their enemy. Ethan finished the bandage and stepped back. "You dizzy?" "A little," Luke admitted. "But I've had worse." Ethan didn't comment. He turned instead to the radio unit mounted near the wall. It was an old military receiver, rugged and over-engineered, the kind that survived cold and neglect. He adjusted the frequency, waited. Nothing. No static, no hiss, just dead air. He switched to the satellite handset next, lifting it from its cradle. The screen flickered, searched, then went blank again. No signal lock. Not even a weak one. "That's strange," Claire said, keeping her voice neutral. "We lost cell coverage about 20 minutes before the accident. I assume the storm." Ethan didn't answer right away. He opened a metal case beneath the table and pulled out a compact spectrum analyzer. Standard issue for a place like this, used to map interference during training exercises. He powered it on and watched the readout stabilize. Then, his jaw tightened. The pattern wasn't random. It wasn't weather. The interference was broad but precise, suppressing specific bands while leaving others untouched. It was the kind of thing you used to shield sensitive infrastructure from intrusion, or to keep something quiet. "This isn't the storm," Ethan said finally. Claire's eyes sharpened. "What is it then?" "A controlled dead zone." Luke shifted on the bench. "You're saying someone shut the signal down?" "I'm saying it's being managed," Ethan replied. "Actively." Claire exhaled slowly. She didn't look surprised. More like a theory had just crossed the threshold into confirmation. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small, black USB drive. No markings, no frills. She set it on the table between them. "I'm FBI," she said, quieter now. "Missing Persons Task Force. Federal jurisdiction. The last 6 months, we've been tracking disappearances across 3 states. No pattern at first. Different ages, different backgrounds. But eventually..." She paused, choosing her words. "Eventually, you notice who doesn't get reported." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" "Seasonal workers, migrant labor, people sleeping out of their cars, no next of kin with the resources to push." Claire's fingers brushed the edge of the drive, not touching it directly. "They vanish, and the system barely blinks." Ethan watched her as she spoke. Her voice didn't shake, but there was tension there, coiled tight beneath the surface. This wasn't an academic exercise for her. "They all passed through this area," she continued. near an old energy pipeline that's supposed to be decommissioned, and a telecommunications relay station up on the ridge. Officially, both are inactive. Unofficially. She trailed off. Nix, who had finally settled near Ethan's side, lifted his head. Not toward Claire, toward Luke. The dog rose and stepped forward, nose low, sniffing with deliberate care. Luke stiffened, instinctively pulling back. "Hey," he muttered. "It's fine," Ethan said, though his attention was fully on Nix now. Nix's nose traced along Luke's coat, paused at the belt line, then returned to the same spot with intent. His body tensed again. Not the full freeze from earlier, but close. Ethan crouched, eyes following the dog's line of interest. He reached toward Luke's belt. Luke's hand came up reflexively, then stopped when he saw Ethan's expression. "What?" Luke asked. "What is it?" Ethan's fingers found something rigid beneath the fabric. He peeled back the lining and revealed a thin, coin-sized device, matte black, no visible markings. It was affixed with industrial adhesive, positioned to avoid casual detection. Claire swore under her breath. "That's not mine," Luke said quickly. "I've never seen that." "I believe you," Ethan said. He pried the device loose and held it up. "It's passive. No continuous transmission. It waits for proximity." "To what?" Luke asked. "To something that's listening," Claire answered. Her face had gone pale, though her eyes burned with focus. "They don't track you all the time, just when you cross certain thresholds." Luke ran a hand through his hair, breath hitching. "They issued us new belts last quarter. Security upgrade. Funded by a private contractor tied to infrastructure protection." Ethan met Claire's gaze. "Someone wanted you brought here." Silence settled over the room again, heavier now. Then, a sound, faint, rhythmic, almost lost beneath the wind. Nix's ears snapped forward. Ethan turned toward the far wall, the one facing the slope beyond the station. He hadn't imagined it before. There it was again, a low mechanical pulse, like a generator cycling somewhere in the distance. Claire felt it too. "Do you hear that?" "Yes." Luke swallowed. "That station on the ridge," he said. "It's not supposed to be operational." Ethan looked down at the device in his hand, then at Nix, who was now standing rigid, eyes fixed on the wall as if he could see through concrete and snow. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a system. Nix took a step closer to the wall and stopped. Not frozen this time, listening. Ethan felt a familiar tightening in his chest. He remembered another place, another night, when Nix had done the same thing, when Ethan had waited for confirmation that never came, when he'd followed procedure instead of instinct. He didn't move away now. Claire noticed the change in him. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you said this place is Navy." "It is," he replied, "which means it's not meant to be used like this." "Used for what?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He walked back to the analyzer, adjusted the range. The interference pattern sharpened, resolving into directional bands. One of them pointed straight toward the ridge. "Containment," he said. Luke stared at the floor. "So what do we do?" Ethan looked at the three of them, at Luke, bleeding and shaken, at Claire holding herself together, with will alone, at Nix, steady as a drawn line. "I can't make arrests," he said. "I can't initiate an operation. I don't have that authority." Claire nodded. "I'm not asking you to." The wind battered the station as if the mountain itself were trying to break in. Nix shifted again, placing himself between the group and the door. Not in alarm, but in decision. Ethan understood. This wasn't about authority. It was about time. And time, like silence, was being controlled. Nix did not settle. He shifted again, paws whispering across the concrete floor, moving from the east-facing wall to the narrow window near the equipment rack. His body language had changed. This was no longer a search pattern. It was assessment. Counting. Measuring distance, angle, probability. Ethan watched him with the kind of attention that bordered on reverence. He had learned long ago that when a canine stopped reacting and started calculating, the danger had already matured. "How many?" Ethan asked quietly. Nix did not look back. He paused near the door, ears rotating, then crossed to the rear wall and stopped. After a moment, he moved again. North corner, south window, back to center. 4. Not people necessarily. Approaches. Claire noticed it too. She had gone still, arms folded not in fear but restraint, as if keeping herself from pacing. Up close, the exhaustion showed on her face. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that came from long nights and longer. Disappointments. Her dark hair was pulled back in a low knot, practical, but strands had escaped and clung to her cheek, damp with sweat despite the cold. "He's mapping," she said. "Isn't he?" "Yes." Luke swallowed. "That bad?" Ethan didn't answer. He crouched and placed a hand on Nix's shoulder, feeling the vibration of tension beneath the dog's coat. Nix was 7 now, black and tan fur flecked with gray around the muzzle, but the muscle beneath was still coiled steel. His eyes stayed sharp, amber reflecting the low light like a warning. "This place has at least 4 viable access routes," Ethan said. "Someone designed it that way." Luke grimaced. "So we're sitting in a box?" "No," Ethan replied. "We're sitting in a corridor." Claire drew a slow breath and reached into her pack. She removed the USB drive again, smaller than it looked moments ago, as if the weight had shifted from physical to symbolic. She held it between her fingers, hesitating. "I didn't tell you everything," she said. Ethan looked at her. He didn't nod. He didn't prompt. He waited. "There's a reason I didn't call this in," Claire continued. "And it's not just paranoia." She met his eyes now. "I believe there's a high-level internal leak. Federal or joint task. Someone who can flag movement, redirect response times, bury reports." Luke stared at her. "You're saying the help we call might be the help that finds us?" "Yes." The words landed hard. Claire placed the USB on the table, then slid it back into her pocket. "The evidence on that drive, transaction logs, site access records, internal authorizations, it doesn't prove everything. But it proves enough. Enough to force daylight." "If it leaves the zone," Ethan said. "Exactly." Luke let out a shaky laugh. "Great. So we just have to walk it out of a blackout in a snowstorm." Nix growled low, not aggressive, cautionary. His head lifted toward the ceiling. Ethan felt it then. A memory, sharp and unwelcome. A different place. Heat instead of cold. Dust instead of snow. A narrow street choked with debris. Civilians pressed into doorways while radios crackled with overlapping commands. Nix, then younger, faster, had stopped dead in his tracks, refusing to advance. Ethan had overridden him. Mission priority, chain of command, clearance. The explosion had come 30 seconds later. Not enough time to evacuate the old man in the doorway. Not enough time to correct a decision already made. Ethan blinked the memory away. "This time," he said softly, "there is no mission." Claire watched his face, reading something shift there. "And no orders." Right. Luke leaned forward, wincing as the movement tugged at his bandage. Then what do we do? Ethan stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't square his shoulders. He simply made a decision and let it settle into the room. We protect life, said. That's it. We don't pursue, we don't expose, we survive and we move the evidence to a place where it can't be buried. Claire nodded slowly. That's not how this usually goes. I know. Outside, the wind changed pitch, pushing snow sideways against the station walls. Nix moved again, repositioning himself between Ethan and the door. Not blocking, but aligning. A quiet signal. They prepared in silence. Ethan powered down all non-essential equipment, leaving only the analyzer and a single low-lumen light. He redistributed supplies, thermal layers, ration bars, a compact medical kit. Light enough to move, enough to last. Claire adjusted her pack, movements efficient despite fatigue. Luke checked his sidearm, hands steady now, eyes focused. Nix watched them all, tail low but relaxed. Ready. Route options? Claire asked. Ethan studied the map etched into his memory of the ridge. There's a maintenance cut west of here. Old service line. Narrow, but shielded from direct sight. If the dead zone is centered on the relay, signal strength should return at the edge. And if it doesn't, then we keep moving. Nix suddenly froze. Not stiff, not alarmed, focused. Ethan felt it before he heard it. A pressure change, subtle but unmistakable. A hum beneath the wind, synchronized now, closer. Nix turned his head slowly and met Ethan's eyes. One sharp exhale left Ethan's chest. They were being timed. Nix did something unexpected. Instead of holding position, he stepped away from the door and pressed his nose briefly to Ethan's chest, once, deliberate. Then turned and moved toward the west wall, stopping beneath a section of exposed conduit. He sat. Ethan stared. That's not a guard behavior, Luke whispered. No, Ethan said. It's a marker. He crossed to the wall and ran his hand along the conduit. Beneath it, a hairline crack in the concrete, too regular to be structural. He pressed. The panel shifted. Behind it, a narrow service crawl, barely shoulder width, sloping downward into darkness. Claire exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. You didn't know that was there? No, Ethan said. Nix had known. They didn't waste time questioning it. Ethan went first, testing each step, then signaled Claire. Luke followed, slower but determined. Nix brought up the rear, pausing once to listen before slipping in and nudging the panel closed behind them. The crawl space smelled of damp stone and cold metal. Their breaths echoed softly, controlled. The hum faded as they descended, replaced by the raw sound of wind through rock. After several minutes, Ethan felt it. A vibration shift. He checked the analyzer. A flicker. Then another. Signal's bleeding back, Claire murmured. Luke let out a breath. So the zone ends. Yes, Ethan said. Which means they expect no one to leave it alive, Claire finished. They emerged into a ravine, snow on, packed deep, visibility low. The storm had thinned here, clouds tearing open to reveal a sliver of moonlight. Nix stepped out first, sniffing, then looked back, waiting. Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief. Trust. He gestured forward. We move now. Quiet. No straight lines. As they started down the ravine, Ethan glanced once over his shoulder, toward the station hidden above. He didn't feel like he was abandoning it. He felt like he was choosing differently. And Nix, silent, steady, moved ahead, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as something older and truer. A guide. They stood at the mouth of the ravine while the storm thinned into a brittle hush. Snow still fell, but it fell straight now, no longer driven sideways. The moon showed itself in fragments, silver shards between torn clouds, enough light to see breath, enough to measure distance. Ethan crouched and drew lines in the snow with a gloved finger. "West," he said, marking a shallow curve that followed the valley floor. "That trail stays low. It bends with the terrain, which means fewer blind silhouettes. But it's watched." Luke frowned. His face had lost some color, but the bandage held. He was breathing better now, controlled. "Watched how?" "Cameras," Ethan replied. "Passive traps, heat triggers, old models but upgraded. Whoever set them expects animals, not people." Claire hugged her arms tight, more from the weight of the moment than the cold. She was listening, not interrupting. Her eyes flicked between the drawn lines and Nix, who stood a few steps away, nose lifted, sampling the air as if reading a story written in scent. "And south?" she asked. Ethan drew a second line, sharper, descending through thicker brush. Steeper, slower, less coverage. The kind of path a human avoids because it punishes mistakes. Nix moved then, padding over to the westward line. He sniffed, paused, then stepped deliberately away from it and stood over the southern descent. He looked back at Ethan once. Decision made. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's sure?" "Yes," Ethan said. "He's not guessing." Luke shifted his weight. "So what's the play?" Ethan straightened. The wind cut across the ravine again, colder now, as if urging them to move. "We split. Controlled separation." Claire stiffened. "Split how?" "You go," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "You take the evidence and you leave the zone. Nix escorts you." Luke's mouth opened, then closed. "And you?" Ethan didn't look at him. "We stay." The words settled heavily between them. Claire shook her head once. "No, that's not." "It's not a pursuit plan," Ethan said calmly. "It's a delay. We create false continuity, noise, movement, signals, enough to make them believe the objective hasn't changed." Luke exhaled sharply. "You're talking about bait." "I'm talking about time." Claire stepped closer, her face tight with conflict. "I don't trust instincts. I trust systems, data, proof." She tapped the pocket where the USB rested. "This is proof, and you're asking me to hand it to—" She gestured to Nix, then stopped herself. "To something I can't quantify." Ethan softened his tone. "You're not handing it to him. You're trusting his senses where ours fail." Nix approached Claire slowly, deliberately. He didn't crowd her. He stopped just close enough that she could feel his warmth through the cold air. He lifted his head and touched his nose, lightly to the back of her gloved hand. One brief contact, then turned away. No insistence, no waiting. He started toward the southern path. Claire stared after him, then down at her hand, as if expecting to find something there. A mark, a sign. Luke broke the silence. "I've been a cop 22 years. Every time I ignored the thing that didn't fit my report, it came back worse. Maybe this time," he swallowed, "we try something else." Claire closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the decision was there. "All right," she said. "I go." They moved quickly after that. Ethan reactivated the analyzer and adjusted its output, feeding it a looping signal, just enough to mimic movement within the station above. He triggered a low-power beacon and timed it to pulse irregularly. the kind of pattern that suggested human error, not automation. Luke helped, despite Ethan's attempts to sideline him. He set reflective markers at angles that bent moonlight into the trees, false glints where no one stood. He knocked loose a shutter panel, letting it creak in the wind like careless movement. "Make it messy," Ethan murmured. Luke gave a humorless smile. "I can do messy." Claire adjusted her pack straps, checking and rechecking the seals. She looked smaller now, burdened with the knowledge she carried. Nix waited at the edge of the southern descent, patient but alert, his body angled downhill, ready. Ethan approached her last. "You'll feel the signal come back before you see it," he said. "Don't stop when it does. Get 2 ridge lines past the return point before you transmit." She nodded. "And you?" "We'll keep them guessing." She hesitated, then reached out, gripping Ethan's sleeve. Her fingers were cold but steady. "This isn't an arrest," she said, repeating his words back to him. "It's a release." "Yes." She released him and turned toward Nix. "Lead," she said quietly. Nix didn't look back. He moved. They had been separated less than 3 minutes when the sound came. A low thrum. Mechanical. Closer now. Luke froze. "That's not wind." Ethan was already moving, adjusting the beacon's frequency. "No, it's a drone. Rotary, low altitude." Luke cursed under his breath. "They're sweeping." Ethan shut down the analyzer and let the false signal die abruptly. "Good," he said. "They'll think we made a mistake." Above them, the thrum passed overhead, then circled. A shadow crossed the snow, indistinct but deliberate. Luke watched it go. "You ever notice," he said quietly, "how the people who build these systems always assume they'll control the variables?" Ethan checked his watch. "They forget one." "What's that?" "Choice." Nick stopped without warning. Claire nearly collided with him as the path narrowed between 2 stands of frozen pine. She caught herself, heart pounding, and followed his gaze. Ahead, the snow was untouched. No tracks, no broken branches. And yet... Nix's hackles rose. He turned his head slightly, nose testing the air, then stepped sideways, pulling Claire off the path and into a shallow depression hidden by brush. He lowered himself, pressing his body against the ground. Claire dropped with him, breath shallow. A second later, a thin red line cut across the space where her chest would have been. Laser. She felt the cold then, not from the air but from the knowledge that she had just walked through a kill lane. Nix did not growl. He did not bark. He waited. Back in the ravine, Ethan felt the shift like a pressure change in his lungs. He didn't know why, only that something had tightened, somewhere beyond sight. He glanced at Luke. "They've got eyes on the trail." Luke nodded. "Snipers?" "Spotters, at least." The drone's hum returned, lower now, slower. Testing. Ethan adjusted the beacon one last time and tossed it down slope. It bounced, slid, and vanished into brush. He activated it mid-fall. The response was immediate. The hum veered. The shadow shifted. Luke let out a breath. Took the bait. For now. They moved then. Not toward escape, but toward visibility. Toward sound. Toward the shape of being found. Claire stayed still until Nix moved again. When he did, it was careful, measured. He led her around the depression, keeping low, using the slope to break sightlines. She followed, trusting his pauses more than her instincts. Minutes passed. Then, a vibration in her pack. She stopped. Nix didn't. She felt it again, stronger. The phone she'd sealed deep for emergencies only, still dead moments ago, flickered to life. One bar, she swallowed hard and kept moving. Behind her, somewhere up the mountain, Ethan and Luke were becoming the story someone else would chase. Ahead of her, the valley opened. Nick slowed, then looked back once, eyes catching moonlight. Not command, confirmation. They moved on. The forest grew denser as Claire followed Nix deeper into the snowbound timberline. The air here felt different, thicker somehow, muffled, as if the world had been wrapped in layers of cotton and ice. Snow clung to the branches overhead, bending them low enough to form natural tunnels. Every step Claire took sank half a foot into powder that looked harmless but pulled at her calves like wet sand. Nix never took the obvious route. Whenever the terrain opened into something that looked easy, a straight line, a shallow slope, a natural corridor, he veered away without hesitation. He favored the difficult paths. Uneven ground, clustered trees, tight angles where human movement would slow and frustration would rise. Claire noticed the pattern. "He's avoiding efficiency," she whispered, more to steady herself than to speak. Nix flicked one ear back, acknowledging the sound without looking at her. His gait remained smooth, economical. 7 years old, Ethan had said. Past his physical peak, maybe. But there was nothing hesitant in him. His black and tan coat was dusted white now. Snow caught along his shoulders and muzzle, but his eyes stayed sharp, constantly working. Claire trusted data. She trusted models, probabilities, margins of error. But what Nix was doing wasn't random. It was instinct refined by experience, pattern recognition without spreadsheets. They moved for nearly 20 minutes before the first near miss. Nix stopped so abruptly that Claire collided into him again, catching herself just in time. His body went rigid, tail low, head angled toward the base of an ancient pine ahead. Claire followed his gaze. Nothing. No sound. No movement. Then she saw it. A subtle disturbance beneath the snow near the tree's roots. Not a footprint. Something cleaner. Too clean. Nix shifted sideways, pressing his flank against her legs, forcing her off the path. He guided her toward the tree itself, toward a massive knot of exposed roots, twisted, together like frozen serpents. They slid in behind it, bodies pressed close to bark and earth. The smell of old sap and rot filled Claire's nose. Seconds later, a faint mechanical click came from where they had just stood. A camera waking up. Claire closed her eyes, breath locked in her chest. Nix didn't move. They waited until the cold seeped into Claire's fingers and made them ache. Only when Nix eased backward, slow, deliberate, did she follow. They circled wide, moving downslope, using the terrain to swallow their heat signatures. Claire's heart hammered as they went. That was number 1, she murmured to herself. The second came faster. The forest narrowed into a rocky spine where ice glazed the stone in translucent sheets. Claire's boots slipped despite her care, the sound sharp in the quiet. Nix reacted instantly, nudging her sideways into a narrow crevice between 2 boulders. She barely fit, shoulders scraping ice, breath puffing white in panic. Nix wedged himself in front of her, blocking the opening. Moments later, voices drifted past, muted by snow, distorted by distance. "Check the ridge. Negative, thermal's clear." The beam of a light swept across the rocks, lingering just long enough for Claire to feel it like a hand brushing her skin. Then it moved on. Nix exhaled, a soft huff that fogged the ice. Claire pressed her forehead briefly to the rock, fighting the tremor in her hands. Twice. Twice she should have been caught. They moved again, slower now, Claire's legs burned, lungs aching with every breath of frozen air. She was trained for field work, but not this. This was pursuit without rules, terrain chosen by something that didn't think like a human. And then Nix did the unthinkable. He led her toward open ground. A wide, shallow clearing stretched ahead, snow unbroken, moonlight spilling across it like a spotlight. No trees, no cover, no place to hide. Claire stopped dead. "No," she whispered. "Nix, no." The dog didn't slow. He walked straight into the clearing. Claire's instincts screamed. Every lesson she'd ever learned told her this was a kill zone. She imagined scopes adjusting, fingers tightening. But nothing happened. No lights, no shots, no shouts. At the far edge of the clearing stood a structure half buried by snow. Weathered wood, rusted metal, its roof sagging under years of neglect. An old snow rescue shelter. Claire's breath hitched. Nix paused at the threshold and looked back at her, amber eyes steady. Not urging, not commanding, inviting. She crossed the clearing in a sprint, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. She reached the shelter and threw herself inside just as a distant shout echoed from the tree line behind them. Nix followed and nudged the door closed with his shoulder. Inside, the shelter smelled of dust, oil, and forgotten winters. A single bench lined one wall. Emergency posters curled and yellowed. In the corner, half hidden beneath a tarp, sat a compact generator, older than Claire, judging by the casing, but intact. And above it, bolted to the roof frame, a short antenna mast angled toward the sky. Claire laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You knew." Nix shook snow from his coat and sat, watching her. Her hands moved on instinct now. She tore the tarp away, checked the fuel gauge, low but not empty. She primed the generator, yanked the cord. Nothing. Again. The engine coughed, then caught, rattling the small structure as it came to life. Lights flickered. The antenna hummed. Claire pulled her phone from deep inside her pack. 1 bar, then 2. Enough. She didn't hesitate. She transmitted everything she had in one compressed burst. Coordinates of the pipeline corridor, coordinates of the ridge relay station, warning, controlled signal suppression zone, warning, do not trust local law enforcement response. She hit send. The progress bar crawled forward, agonizingly slow. Nix stood suddenly, ears snapping up. Footsteps outside. Close. Claire watched the bar hit 90%. A shadow crossed the frosted window, her transmission completed. The generator sputtered. Once, twice, then died. The lights went out. Darkness slammed down around them. Nix stepped in front of Claire without a sound, body low, ready. From outside came the unmistakable click of a rifle bolt. Claire knew then, without panic, without doubt, that she would not leave this place free. But the data already had. The door burst open. Cold air and snow poured in, along with 2 figures in winter tactical gear. Faces obscured, movements precise. One leveled his weapon at Claire, the other scanned the room. "Hands," a voice ordered. Calm, professional. Claire raised them slowly. Nix growled, low, controlled, but did not advance. "Dog stays," the man warned. Nix held. The men moved fast after that. Claire was cuffed, searched. Her pack was dumped, contents scattered. One of them found the USB drive, turned it over. Expression unreadable. "Too late," Claire said quietly. The man didn't respond. As they dragged her outside, she caught one last glimpse of Nix standing in the doorway of the shelter, snow swirling around him. Their eyes met. Not fear, understanding. The men pushed her forward into the trees. Behind them, the shelter stood dark and silent again, its brief roll complete. Claire woke to fluorescent light and the steady hum of climate control. The room was clean in a way that felt intentional. Polished concrete floors, steel walls, nothing out of place. Her wrists were secured to the arms of a chair with soft restraints, the kind designed to prevent injury rather than inflict it. Across from her sat a man in a tailored winter coat, charcoal gray, collar turned down. He had removed his gloves and laid them neatly on the table. Owen Hale looked exactly like the sort of man who expected to be believed. Mid-40s, tall, broad-shouldered but not bulky. His hair was cut short and combed with care, silver threading through dark brown at the temples. His face was angular, clean-shaven, with a mouth that settled naturally into something close to a smile. When he spoke, his voice was measured, warm, even, like a practiced reassurance. "You're cold," he said, noticing the tension in her shoulders. "We can fix that." "I'm fine," Claire replied. Hale nodded, as if she'd confirmed something he already knew. "You're resilient." "That tracks." He stood and poured 2 cups of coffee from a thermal carafe. The smell was rich, real. He placed one near her without pushing it closer. "I know you think you're the hero here," he continued. "Most people do. It's not a flaw. It's a story we tell ourselves to get through the night." Claire met his eyes. "And what story do you tell yourself?" Hale smiled faintly. "That I'm keeping the lights on." He gestured toward a wall display that flickered to life. Maps, flow diagrams, transaction trees branching outward like veins. "Stability is expensive," he said. "Energy grids, data corridors, labor pipelines, none of it functions on good intentions alone." "You traffic people," Claire said. Hale didn't flinch. "We allocate risk." The word landed with a dull thud. "People at the margins," he continued. "Untracked, unprotected. They disappear into the cracks of the system every day. I didn't invent that reality. I just made it predictable." Claire leaned back, testing the restraints. "You're not a villain in your own head." "No," Hale agreed. "I'm a custodian." Miles away, the cold bit harder. Ethan and Luke moved along the edge of a frozen service road, the pipeline's shadow cutting a dark line through the snow. The structure ahead had once been a cold storage facility. Massive doors sealed with rust, warning signs bleached white by years of wind. It squatted low against the earth, half buried, forgotten by anyone who didn't know where to look. Luke slowed, breath fogging. "This place was shut down 10 years ago." "Officially," Ethan said. They slipped inside through a maintenance hatch Nix had marked earlier. The interior air was stale, metallic. Frost coated the walls in uneven sheets. Rows of refrigeration units stood dormant, their housings repurposed to conceal server racks humming, quietly behind insulated panels. Luke stared. Jesus. This wasn't just containment. It was infrastructure. Ethan moved deeper, eyes tracking cables routed along the ceiling, backup generators tucked into alcoves. Screens flickered with logs, transactions, access timestamps, biometric entries. Video feeds rolled on a loop, loading bays, holding corridors, faces blurred but bodies unmistakably human. "Data center," Luke whispered. "And a prison." "Leverage," Ethan said. "Both." A noise echoed from the far end. Boots on metal. They froze. Ethan signaled Luke back, then edged toward a side corridor. He felt it then. Something familiar in the air. A scent. Faint, but unmistakable. Blood. Nix emerged from the shadows. He limped, favoring his left foreleg, a shallow cut visible beneath the matted fur. His chest rose and fell faster than usual, but his eyes were clear, focused. He stopped in front of Ethan, tail low, then turned and started toward a narrow service, passage concealed behind a refrigeration unit. Ethan's chest tightened. "Good boy," he murmured. Nix paused, waiting, not urging, not pleading, trust. They followed. The passage led them to a control annex overlooking the main floor. Through reinforced glass, they saw movement. Workers in unmarked winter gear, efficient and silent. Disconnecting drives, sealing crates. "They're wiping it," Luke said. "And moving the people." Ethan checked the time. Claire's transmission would have triggered ripples by now, alerts, anomalies, questions. Hale would feel the pressure. He would respond by accelerating. Ethan keyed a short-range jammer and activated it, just enough to introduce latency. Not a blackout. A hesitation. "Delay," he said. "Not destruction." Luke nodded, jaw set. "I'll cover the north aisle." Ethan met his eyes. "You don't have to." "I do," Luke interrupted. His voice was steady now, stripped of fear. "I signed off on silence before. Told myself it wasn't my call. I'm done with that." They split. Nick stopped at the edge of the annex and sat. Not alert, not guard. Sat. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Nix lifted his head and looked straight through the glass, past the workers, to a figure stepping into frame below. Owen Hale. Even at a distance, his presence shifted the room. He moved without haste, hands clasped behind his back, issuing instructions with small nods. A man accustomed to compliance, Ethan felt something cold settle in his gut. Nix didn't growl. He whined, soft, almost questioning. Ethan understood. Hale wasn't here to fight. He was here to end things cleanly. The first shot never came. Instead, alarms flared, muted, internal, triggered by the jammer's disruption. Workers paused, confused. Ethan used the moment to move, dropping from the annex into the aisle below with controlled force. He didn't aim for heads. He didn't aim to kill. He struck hands, legs, balance, disarming, disabling, moving. Each second mattered more than dominance. Each second bought time. Luke's voice crackled over the line. North aisle secured, 2 down. No fatalities. "Good," Ethan replied. Hale watched it unfold with detached interest, then raised a hand. The workers fell back. Hale stepped forward, stopping several meters from Ethan. Up close, his eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. "You're very good at this," Hale said. "But you're solving the wrong problem." Ethan said nothing. "You think exposure ends it," Hale continued. "It doesn't. It redistributes it. The system adapts." Nix moved to Ethan's side, stance protective despite the limp. Hale noticed the dog and tilted his head. "Animals," he said softly. "They understand hierarchy, necessity." Ethan met his gaze. "They understand loyalty." Hale smiled. "So do I." He tapped an earpiece. Somewhere deeper in the facility, engines roared to life. Luke's voice cut in, tight. "They're loading the transports. We're outnumbered." Ethan nodded once. "We hold." Hale studied him for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "I won't stop you," he said. "Not here. Not like this. But you can't stop what's already in motion." He turned and walked away. The facility shook as vehicles departed. Ethan didn't chase. He didn't fire. He held the ground long enough for the clocks to matter. Luke joined him, breathing hard, blood on his sleeve, not his own. Nix leaned into Ethan's leg, steady despite the pain. Somewhere far above them, systems were waking up, eyes opening, questions forming. It wasn't victory. It was exposure. And sometimes, that was enough to break the quiet. Dawn arrived without ceremony. The first light crept over the ridge in thin, pale bands, washing the snow with a muted blue that softened the violence of the night before. The storm had burned itself out, leaving the forest unnaturally still. Smoke drifted in lazy strands from the cold storage facility's exhaust vents, no longer guarded, no longer hidden. Ethan stood with his hands resting on his knees, breath slow, controlled. His body ached, not from wounds, but from restraint, from holding lines he had been trained to cross. Nix lay beside him on a thermal blanket, chest rising and falling in an uneven rhythm. The cut on his foreleg had been cleaned and wrapped by a field medic hours earlier. Blood still darkened the fur at the edges, but his eyes remained alert, following every movement with quiet intensity. A pair of black SUVs rolled to a stop at the edge of the access road. These were not the vehicles Ethan had seen all night. No unmarked aggression, no private security, posturing. The doors opened in unison. Federal. Men and women in layered winter gear moved with deliberate efficiency, badges visible but not flaunted. One woman stepped forward first, early 40s, average height, lean build. Her hair was dark and cut just above the shoulders, tucked behind her ears, streaked with gray she didn't bother hiding. Her face was sharp but not severe, eyes observant, mouth set in a line that suggested patience had been learned the hard way. "Ethan Cross," she said, consulting a tablet briefly before meeting his gaze. "I'm Agent Priya Desai, Joint Oversight Task Force." Her voice carried no accusation, no warmth either. "Are you injured?" "No," Ethan replied. She nodded once and gestured to the activity behind her. "Your associate?" she asked, glancing at Nix. "German Shepherd K9, name's Nix." Desai crouched slightly, assessing the dog with professional interest. "He'll be transported to veterinary care within the hour. Full treatment. Official record." Nix didn't move. His eyes stayed on Ethan. Luke stood several yards away, wrapped in a blanket, speaking quietly with another agent. His face was drawn, but there was relief there too, something unburdened. Desai straightened. "We recovered 18 individuals from the facility and secondary transport vehicles," she said. "Alive, malnourished, traumatized." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Alive mattered. "Owen Hale is in custody," Desai continued. "Charges pending. Financial crimes, unlawful detention, conspiracy. Some of it will stick, some won't." "And the rest?" Ethan asked. Desai didn't hesitate. "There are gaps." That was honest, at least. Claire Morgan sat on the rear bumper of a rescue vehicle, a blanket draped over her shoulders, hands wrapped around a paper cup that had gone cold. Her face bore the quiet marks of captivity, bruising at the wrists, a split lip. But her posture was upright, alert. She was speaking to a younger agent, explaining something with clipped precision, eyes focused not on the present, but on patterns still forming. When she saw Ethan, she stood. He crossed the snow toward her, Nix's leash looped loosely around his wrist. "You got it out?" she said. "Yes," she exhaled. "Good." They stood there for a moment, words unnecessary. "They came because of the packet," Claire said finally. "Not the local channels, an escalation protocol that bypasses regional command if enough indicators trip at once." Ethan nodded. "Which means someone up the chain tried to bury it," she finished. "And failed." She looked down at Nix, then crouched carefully, ignoring the pain. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Nix tilted his head once, then looked back to Ethan. Claire smiled faintly. "Figures." By mid-morning, the mountain had become a crime scene. Generators hummed. Evidence markers dotted the snow. Cameras documented every inch of the facility that had once existed only in shadow. Ethan sat alone on the steps of the cold storage building as two men approached him. Both wore Navy insignia beneath their parkas. The taller one removed his gloves as he came closer. He was in his early 50s, broad-faced, eyes tired but sharp. His name patch read, Commander Grant Halverson. "I won't insult you by pretending this is a friendly visit," Halverson said. Ethan stood. "I wouldn't expect you to." Halverson studied him for a long moment. "You acted outside your deployment status, outside orders." "Yes, sir." "You interfered with a multi-jurisdictional situation." "Yes, sir." Halverson sighed. "And you didn't kill anyone." "No, sir." The corner of Halverson's mouth twitched. "That's not sarcasm." The second officer, a woman in her late 30s, hair pulled tight, eyes analytical, spoke next. "There will be an internal review," she said. "Full scope, psychological evaluation included." "I'm already on medical hold," Ethan replied. "Yes," she said. "That's not a shield." Halverson raised a hand. "But it's context." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Off the record, what you did complicated a lot of clean narratives. On the record, it saved lives." Ethan didn't respond. Halverson straightened. "You're cleared of criminal liability. Administrative consequences pending." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. "It means you're still a SEAL," Halverson said. "For now." Nix was loaded into a transport vehicle just before noon. The veterinary officer, a man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, checked the bandage once more. "He'll heal," he said. "Strong animal." Nix resisted being lifted until Ethan rested a hand against his chest. "Go," Ethan said softly. Nix watched him for a long second, then allowed himself to be moved. As the vehicle pulled away, Ethan felt something hollow open in his chest. That afternoon, Ethan sat alone in the debrief tent when Claire returned. She no longer wore the blanket. Her posture was steadier now, purpose reclaiming its place. "I just got a call," she said. Ethan looked up. "About what?" Claire hesitated. For the first time since he'd met her, uncertainty crossed her face. "They reopened a cold case," she said. "A disappearance from 12 years ago, female, no body, no follow-up." She swallowed. "My sister." Ethan said nothing. "They found a transaction marker," Claire continued, "buried, routed through a shell hail once consulted for. It doesn't prove anything yet." "But it's a thread," Ethan said. "Yes." Claire looked toward the mountain. "I don't think this network ends here." Ethan followed her gaze. Neither did he. Evening came quickly. The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the snow. Most of the vehicles had departed. The mountain was giving itself back to silence. Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, hands in his pockets. Two options lay in front of him, equally real. Return to active duty, follow orders, accept that the system moved as it always had. Or step into the space between institutions, interagency work, unofficial, unstable. A place where dogs like Nix weren't tools, but partners. Where instinct was allowed to matter. Claire approached him one last time. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "I know." Nix's transport returned then, headlights cutting through dusk. The door opened. Nick stepped out, bandage clean, movement cautious, but steady. He walked straight to Ethan and stopped. No command, no signal, just presence. Ethan looked down at him. For the first time in days, the noise in his head quieted. He didn't know what choice he would make, but he knew he wouldn't make it alone. Sometimes, the miracle is not the sudden rescue, not the thunder or the light from the sky. Sometimes, the miracle is quieter. It is the moment someone chooses to act when no order tells them to. It is the warning we feel before danger shows its face. It is the life that is spared because someone listened. In this story, protection did not come from power alone, but from conscience, faith, and a bond that could not be commanded. The kind of bond that reminds us that God often speaks through instinct, through mercy, through the courage to do what is right when the path is unclear. In our daily lives, we face smaller choices, but they are no less meaningful. Moments when we can look away or step forward. Moments when we can stay silent or become someone else's answer. If this story moved you, let it be a reminder to listen to that quiet voice inside you, to trust compassion, to believe that even in a broken world, God still works through willing hearts. Please share this story with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your prayer. Subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends so you don't miss future stories of courage, loyalty, and faith. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and guide your steps in every unseen moment. Thank you for watching.